Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our pre-meeting. We are going to have a conversation around the town hall and the listening sessions. And Mr. Williams, you're going to give us an update.
Yes, ma'am. I will give kind of an intro and then turn it over to Brent Green with Creech & Associates. They were here last Tuesday. We had 3 different blocks of time for listening sessions. We had I don't know, about 13, 14 folks that showed up across those, and every hour was full of discussion one way or the other about the new town hall. And the folks who came gave a lot of good feedback, asked a lot of good questions. And so tonight, we mentioned in our update last month that we have picked back up with the schematic design phase. And so an important part of that is hearing from the public, as well as kind of getting clarity that we can give to the architects for a couple of design elements that will really drive and dictate the design of the building. And so Creech & Associates are here tonight to give you guys an update and then ask you guys some of the similar questions to help determine where we're going with the design layout of the building to make sure that we can get right back on schedule with schematic design and head on to the construction document phase sometime next year. So Brent? And thank you to the mayor and a couple commissioners who came to the sessions. I think it was very helpful, the input you guys gave as well. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here with you. Again, this evening, I think Bobby pretty well put it on the tee, so I'm not going to do too much more of an intro. I'm hoping to speak a little and listen a lot, because the intent of tonight is to sort of hear from you all regarding some of these same key driving topics that we discussed in the listening sessions and that are available in the online survey that is currently posted. So I put this up just as a refresher that this was sort of the direction that we've been headed down. And again, I think the idea being that we're looking at a combination of the uses for this building in its future, as well as the new facility, which we're calling the annex currently on the adjacent parcels. That makes for some exciting opportunities, like how we address street frontage and/or spaces between the existing and new building. And we'll talk about each one of those as we move through this process. So as Bobby mentioned, we did have we're sort of in the process of receiving public input. We had 3 one-hour sessions, and I would say, quantity is not important, but the quality was really high. And the most interesting thing is that there were some really common threads, some of which paralleled the discussions from a year ago, and some of which were actually a little bit different. And so I think that talks to the evolution of this, as we asked a different set of questions prior. So I think you can see there topics that sort of surfaced, making sure that adequate staff space was provided. There were some really fun ideas that were posed, like should we include space for vendors, and what does that mean in terms of flexibility, even down to aesthetic components like what the building looks like at night and in the evening, and thinking about sort of lighting signatures. But you can see there 5 or 6 bullets that were pulled out. I'll say one thing. Again, this building was also discussed as much as opportunities for the new facility. I think the resounding theme was community space, and how we can transition this room, how perhaps it can expand, and how we can provide a variety of community spaces, both larger and smaller, for the just the range of public organizations and nonprofit groups that could benefit from that. And so that was a theme that certainly came forward. And that also helps us as we program and think about what spaces need to be in the new facility, knowing that we have this as that potential amenity. The adjacency to the Greenway is really interesting, and so we heard in every meeting resoundingly, is there a way to have restrooms accessible from the outside so that when people are here and off hours, that we have a place to utilize as citizens? And so we thought that was something that we wanted to bring to your attention. Integrating history has been a topic that we've had since the beginning, and that's certainly something that we're going to work with you all to make sure that we include in the design. Those last 2 bullets are certainly of interest, because they give us some hints about what the thoughts are about the exterior of the building as well. And again, I think having an aesthetic that complements this building but doesn't necessarily match it, y'all, can I say it? Yeah, right, not matchy-matchy, right? I think was a phrase actually used by 2 separate individuals. So I think that's well taken, and certainly speaks to designing a building that fits into the downtown, but speaks to now and perhaps moving forward. That's also a comment that we received from one of the few surveys online that we have so far. And again, as a designer, you get excited when you hear people say things like, it should have an aha moment, or something that, makes everyone excited that it's a nice place to come to. So we'll work together to make sure that we right-size that and fit that within the components of all the other design parameters. It's just a brief summary on some of the driving topics that we heard from the public input summary. So really what I like to do is then to get into some of the dialogue with you all. And you can see here we've had those listening sessions. We have that online survey open until the 17th, I believe, is the date for that. And then we're here tonight to provide this update. We're going to go away and work for a couple weeks and come back with an update on even what we were able to accomplish in that amount of time to integrate some of those ideas that we hear from you all tonight and from the public into the design. But there are driving topics for us that we call design drivers, and you can see number 2 and number 3 right there, and those are perhaps the largest of all, because the boardroom is the largest space in the program, and where it finds itself in the building has not only significance relative to how town halls are designed, but just in terms of implications on how other spaces in the building work, including the main circulation. So should it be on the first floor? Should it be on the second floor? Should it be in the center of the building? Should it be on one side or the other? Should it have windows? Should it not? Those are all kind of discussion topics that help us decide where the chamber should reside. How big should it be? In our last round, we were talking about something around 200 seats. Perhaps that's still an effective number for us to be planning for. And then number 5 there, really, I partially answered earlier, which is, should we also be planning for a community space there? Or is the idea that we're transforming this into that amenity sufficient for the design components and needs for both functions? And then, as I teased earlier, we have this fun opportunity between the 2 buildings, this 80 by 80 foot square that'll be held on 2 edges. And if there's discussions like we had prior about elements in the plaza that are of interest, we would love to hear those thoughts from you as well. So that's enough from me. I'm going to put this last slide up and then try and open the floor from discussion, but I mentioned before where the chamber is located. And so you have sort of what I would call 4 options, or really 2 options with an A and B in front of you, and you're basically following that red square around. I will say, just like this building, and is true with many traditional town hall designs across our state and the country, frankly, you would expect a certain amount of axiality in a town hall design. When you enter this building, you enter the front door, and you're on axis with the chamber. It's directly in front of you. It's no doubt about what the main component of the building is. I would say you find that in 65, 70% of town halls. If y'all have ever been to Davidson, you know that you walk into a center space and the chamber is actually on your left. So there is also precedent for that as well. But in any event, it's a significant space, and it needs a significant location in the building. So you also have some historical components that would say, is it on the second floor? In days gone by, it felt like the space was more important if you had to enter the building and go up a floor to get to it. It was the floor of nobles, the piano nobile. In today's world of thinking about life safety and moving people around and some of the components that come with that, it's more efficient perhaps to think about it being on the first floor because it's easier in and out and less use of elevator and vertical circulation, and even perhaps security on some levels. So, and then of course, option A1 is, should it be on the first floor in the center? Option A2 is, should it be on the second floor in the center? You'll notice that both of those have a hint at some sort of 2-story space or aha moment, and those may find themselves in different places as we push the diagrams around. Option B1 says chamber on the left on the first floor, so you would come into a center aha moment and turn one direction. Or it could also be on the other side. So those 4 things there are sort of 4 options we place before you as where this chamber, which drives our design, could be located. So before I let go, I'll leave you with one more thought. One of the driving topics that was not on this list was this, actually it was on the list, perhaps I just didn't read it. And there was a lot of discussion about, should we be able to walk out of the back of this building, cross the courtyard, and walk into the other building directly? Or should I be going out to the sidewalk and going around and going into a front door that faces 115? And it did come up pretty repeatedly that there was a desire to be able to move sort of directly between both buildings. It sort of makes sense, right, was the sort of pervasive theme there. So, If you place that chamber on the right side on the first floor, you're basically saying you're entering the building into the chamber, which I think we all know could probably present some challenges depending on how flexible you all might want the chamber space to be. Maybe that's an amenity. So those are the type of topics that we're thinking about in a big picture when we're trying to decide where the chamber would be located. So I'll pause here and try and entertain any question or discussion that you all may have.
So like the safety aspect is something the mayor and I have spoken about a great deal. Have we had our police department, our chief, has he reviewed any of these and given his suggestion from a safety perspective?
No, ma'am, this is fresh off the press, but that's a great idea.
Could we do that first? I think that would help to see from his perspective for future boards and their safety, what would be ideal.
Sure,
And even the fire chief?
certainly.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that. Also, I agree with the mayor and my commissioner regarding safety, and having been in the safety profession for over 30 years, retired homicide detective. Because it's very important that we have access in the event there is the need for evacuation, medical emergency, or any emergency such as that. And also that the commissioners and the staff and the employees are also safeguarded. So it would have to be presented where it's not access to the street, just to protect those of us that are, serving the community. So yes, indeed, I would suggest that the chief should have some input. And if necessary, I'd love to have some input also. Thank you, with my expertise.
Anyone else? Commissioner Tidwell.
I think, my opinion, having it on the first floor where people can enter and leave safely is the best choice, in my opinion. I'll also point out that I've been taking attendance over the past almost year now. And at the most, we've had about 41 people in here at one point. But by the time we get down to regular business, it trickles down to on average of about 12. And so I think allowing them the opportunity to leave efficiently also points to having it on the first floor. Definitely would love the input from both chiefs, anybody on this board with their experiences. So I'm not saying I'm 100% on any of these, but I'd love to, that's just my opinion on it.
Anyone else? Commissioner Partee?
Yes, Mr. Roberts, would the boardroom be available to the public to either rent or use in itself, other than for board meetings?
So that's a that's a good question. That's something depends on how big it is. If it's a bigger room, you can section them off. I don't know if you've been, several of y'all may have been to Kannapolis and Concord and places like that. Depending on how big it is, you can section off like the board area, and then you can section off, depending on how big it is, in multiple sections for smaller rentals or larger rentals. So it just depends.
Commissioner Munger?
Sure. So my questions on these four diagrams is, which one offers the most efficient use of space? How do we maximize the space? Because we can meet wherever, but I want the building to house the people who are here every day and give them the most space.
That's a great question. I think by default, the B options are more efficient because there's just inherently less primary circulation space on the lower level. It's a singular split down the center, if you will, instead of one that sort of has two rear hallways.
It's kind of what I was thinking. Follow-up counterpoint to Commissioner Kidwell, because you know I'm going to do it. There are 52 chairs out in that audience, and that doesn't include everyone up here and everyone down here, and I've seen this place standing room only. So 41, I disagree.
You can disagree all you want, sir. I did take count.
Okay.
And if you take staff away, yeah,
Staff or bodies?
yeah, but they have to be here. I'm talking about the general public, and that's who we serve.
Okay.
Commissioner Kovacs.
I like symmetry, so I'm here for the middle, but y'all made me forget my point. In my opinion, I liked the first floor access point just because of the flow in and out and people to come, not having to wait for elevators if it's multiple people, stuff like that. And I seriously forgot my point. Man, look what you did. Look what you made me do.
Commissioner Phillips.
Are there, so I know like there's Kannapolis and all those places. Do we have towns within driving distance that would be an example of each that maybe we could go tour to get a better hands-on eye view?
Absolutely. We did that a year or so ago as part of a process. We'd be happy to help you facilitate that. And yes, they are within sort of a nice radius of here. We've mentioned a couple of them just this evening. Sure.
I think
That
that'd be a
actually would be a very good idea if we could schedule something for the board to go
Get that
and see.
quickly here, but absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Boone?
Thank you. A couple questions about the diagram. Why is the red dotted line going through each one of them?
That's a great question. And back to what I talked about, sort of the traditional nature of design of town halls and how the building has symmetry or axiality. And that's just intended to highlight the center line of each of those buildings.
And you're saying here the second floor would be 16 to 20 foot tall?
The floor-to-floor height that the chamber is on will be taller than the floor-to-floors on other levels. Yes, just
Same thing
because
on,
of the-
same thing on the first floor if it's on the first floor?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. Well, I think we've all had some really good ideas here, and I want to say that I did attend the meeting last Tuesday, and I want to compliment you on listening intent, well, everybody who spoke, and sometimes we don't see that, so thank you very much.
Commissioner Kovacs?
I remembered. What is the square footage of the bottom floor? About?
So we're, what, 50-ish, so 15 or so, 14,000 square feet is
I
around.
was trying to compare it to this building.
So it's +2, a little more than double. If you look at, I guess, the site plan up there in the corner.
And to say a little bit more on what Commissioner Boone said, I actually had a resident reach out to me that attended, and they said it was the most comfortable they've ever felt at Town Hall and the most heard they've felt. So you guys did a great job on letting people talk and diving into their questions more, so thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Commissioner Munger?
Couple screens back, you had mentioned, I think possibly the first one, you had mentioned that there was a thought process about having public restrooms available here. No, would be my first thought. We have public restrooms at Veterans Park, we have public restrooms at Holbrook Park. I wouldn't be in favor of that.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the first floor option. It's up to the board what floor you put it on. I think the folks who construct these buildings will tell you a cheaper cost to put it on the first floor, and maybe you can confirm that or not.
You're right. I think that's true. I mean, we have larger vertical circulation elements, the more people that occupy floors above the main level. So that all translates into additional costs.
I would just say, as we value engineer, if we have to do some of that, that's a thought process you need to think in the back of your mind.
Commissioner Boone?
Thank you. One last question. What's the height of this building here, this room?
This room, we talked about the other day, is around 16 feet.
So it'd be very similar to this.
Would be similar, but not quite as high. I think there's a certain ratio of height when you get into a larger space. We want to be mindful of that, but we've also heard you all speak of challenges in here acoustically and some of the things that maybe didn't work as well. So we want to take all that into account. But comparable, but maybe a little less tall.
Do you think some of the challenges from just the acoustics in here, it's because it's somewhat of a round room?
That's part of it. Also, the hard surfaces that are all in the vertical and horizontal upper planes are sort of challenging. And we'll think about all of those things, specifically if we think about operable walls and subdividing spaces, all those things are also acoustical components as well.
So If there's not any other questions, I have a couple. The first one is in regards to the seating space. Are you considering a space like this where there are chairs? Or is there a theater seating that we're looking at? And what are the benefits to either?
Well, that's a great question. Currently, we're contemplating a flexible seating arrangement similar to what you have, and I would say that's what we see in 80 to 90% of town halls in today's world. Fixed seating is inflexible and sort of leads to a limited amount of use, based on our opinion. Sloped floor is a wonderful thing for larger spaces, but also creates some accessibility challenges that can be resolved. You've all been to theaters where that's handled. It does make for a little bit more circulation, makes for rooms a little larger. But if that's something that you're interested in, we can investigate that. Sloped floors always go with fixed seating, so those are sort of a pair if we want.
I would, from where I sit, I prefer this because then we can turn it and use it as flex space as well in the future for other things. But I just wanted to see where your head was in regards to the seating itself. I agree with all of the commissioners up here in regards to their feedback. Safety is a huge one. If I, in looking at these options, my option is B2. It looks like that would put the chamber to the north end, correct?
So B2, just to make sure that
To be
I
clear,
would place the chamber in this end of the.
no, I want the other
I've
end.
done a better job on this. So we're talking about true north here, which is the way we're used to looking at the site. You know, of course, this is the existing town hall. When we rotate this plan 90 degrees, so yeah, so this is the right side.
So, okay, so then that means
So
it's
B1.
B1 is the correct option then, from where I sit.
Yes.
That way, this space is also flex space. I hate you, I don't like the pointer either.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so B1, and then that gives the ability to utilize the space out in the courtyard. I guess the question for the board, because safety is always a huge concern, is that space going to be utilized as a community space, or are we going to energize that with office space?
That's a great question. If we're speaking with the chamber not being there, then we have that flexibility. It could be any of those things.
But as we grow and as, 10, 20, 30 years out, what does that look like?
So that's another good question, and what we've done in other locations is allow that to look like something today that might serve one function that could ultimately translate or transition easily into office space down the road when that space is needed from growth.
Okay.
So again, it could be a more community or open type use that 20 years from now, when staff grows to a certain point, has to transition into office space. We want to design the building flexibly. That was something that someone mentioned in one of the sessions, to be forward thinking.
All right, Mr. Roberts.
So would you tell us again which chamber or which option has a chamber facing the courtyard?
The chamber facing the courtyard is B2.
All right, and so, I know you're going to probably show some pictures, but most folks don't realize the elevation that's out there and how you get into, I'm sure some people would like to just walk right into the building, but that's not a probably good option. So anyways, maybe we want to talk about
That
something.
was a great segue, thank you. And he's exactly right. You all have all walked this out the back here. It has some vertical change. There is actually a significant amount of topography between these two, which hurts and helps. Honestly, more helps, because it sort of takes the scale of the taller building and sort of breaks it down a little bit vertically to this one. It also does, as Anthony just mentioned, there will be a design choice whether or not the first floor, sort of is able to be entered from that courtyard, right? This is as if you're standing on Old Statesville Road looking directly at this facade. So you can see the town hall cut in section, and then you can see this bigger mass, which is indicating sort of the 4-story new facility. So if we're going to enter the building from that courtyard, which we heard from multiple people, then we're going to be lifting the building up so that the floor levels align, so that you can come off the courtyard into that structure. Now, all those things being said, pushing the chamber to the other side in the option you chose helps us with that, right? Because that doesn't lock us in. It allows us some flexibility to resolve that and what those uses are on that end.
What does drainage then look like with the topography? I mean, I've seen buildings where they've sat lower, and when in big rain happens, and if you've got double doors there that can be opened, I see.
Wonderful question. And we don't like to put buildings in holes. So the option we're describing would be lifting the building up and actually sort of eliminating that. So it would be, we would have a little bit of a, I don't want to use the pointer again, the northern end of the building would be lifted up out of the ground a little bit to resolve the issue that you're describing right there.
Is that what the dotted line right there
The
represents?
dotted line represents the existing grade, and that's really what that's just showing you how the building could or could not react to grade. We're showing that a couple of steps up in that section there that could go away. And if, again, these were done prior to the public input as a way for us to study scale, I think what we heard is because there needs to be an entrance between the two, we're going to be lifting that building up a little bit more to facilitate that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Partee?
Going back to the original design with the conference room, with the boardroom, I didn't ask if there's any accessibility for handicap ramps, entry, seating, and so forth, and also in this design, entry for handicap also, wheelchairs, accessibility.
Yes, and that is not only a code requirement, but something that we do in all of our chamber spaces. Of course, the single-level floor accommodates accessible seating in a dispersed fashion. And then, sort of unlike the situation that you all have here, typically we'll have one side with the stair and one side with the ramp to accommodate potentially disabled commissioners.
Any other questions? Mr. Roberts?
Just one last one. On the, what I'd say the courtyard side, if you want to call it that, if there's a door there, most likely that door would be locked, not open all the time, just from a safety standpoint. As you notice, if you've been in a lot of town halls, same here, like the back door, wouldn't just be free-for-all open. We force folks to come in the front door. So just to be aware of that, that's most likely how something like that would go, because you just wouldn't have free-for-all just to open all doors and go wherever you want.
That's right. And we've contemplated having that as a suite that you enter from there, that you sort of enter and have to go back out of, that becomes some sort of amenity that's just sort of accessible from the courtyard. I mean, there's lots of different ways we can resolve that through design, but you're right. We need to think about how that is secured. Great point.
Any other questions?
I had one more thing that I want to mention, and I'm sorry that I didn't do that sooner. The early diagrams, we've showed the facade edge of the new building aligning with the existing, and that was our planning intent, and that was before we sort of accounted for the newest DOT requirements that are sort of going to cause us to slide back 5 or 6 feet from where we're showing that now. So I don't think it will be noticeable, and it will actually help us to have a little bit more relief from the street so that we can do the planners and the things that a planning department would like to see. But I want to let everyone know that the two buildings are not going to align for that reason.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Munger.
So yeah, just kind of tagging on to that one, because I know at one point they're looking at trying to widen this road out here. Yeah, so is this building going to cause a problem for that?
No, and it'll be grandfathered in because of where it is. It's just that when we build a new structure, they will hold us accountable for the new right-of-way, if that makes sense.
So essentially, instead of taking this building and pushing it back, if it were to, in theory, be rebuilt, we're going to end up having to take land from Cashins. Would that be a fair assumption?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that, but.
Yeah, just curious. Thank you, though.
Any other questions? So what else do you need from us?
So actually, this has been fantastic. Thank you all for humoring me and giving us your feedback on these topics. Our door is always open. The survey is available online. We hope that everyone will please take it. We would like to receive as much feedback as possible to make this building unique and respond to your community's needs. So thank you.
Perfect. So in the meantime, we'll make sure that you're connected with police and fire, with our police and fire chiefs, so that they can also weigh in. And then we'll need to also set up a tour for some other town halls for the board as well.
Make some suggestions with staff, and then we'll get that information.
Perfect. Thank you so very much.
No,
No
ma'am.
matchy-matchy. All right. It is,
Break this up. You just opened the door. I was just going to plug, if folks go to our website, huntersville.org, they'll see a button, click here for public input, and that is an option. You can go. It's got all of our surveys. We're hoping to add more opportunities for citizen engagement. They can get it right there, 2 clicks to our website. Click on the link, click on the survey for Town Hall. We would love to hear what folks have to say.
wonderful. Thank you very much. We have 15 minutes, and the board will adjourn until 6 p.m.